Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm the Gnarly Gnome. This is the Weekly Pint. It's the show that's not a show. It's a weekly happy hour, an excuse to hang out and have a beer together. Hi, how's everybody doing? Tell me what you're drinking, because that is the whole idea of this, is to have a drink together. I'm about to crack open another one. I had my last Grainworks key lime donut goza, and it was delicious, and it's probably completely wiped out my palate for what I'm going to do tonight, but I'm going to drink some Oktoberfest beer. But it's not what you think. It is not an Oktoberfest showdown. It's a vehicle into the conversation that I want to have, because I do want to have a conversation tonight. Before we get there, though, if you're new, if this is your first time hanging out, this is, like I said, it's not a show. It's an excuse to hang out and have a beer together. And what that means is that we have a conversation. So wherever you're watching, you can jump on the chat and you can take part in the conversation that way. If you want to get really crazy with it, you can also call into the show. So my mouse pad died, so I have to reach across the table now to get anything to pop up on screen. But there's the number. You can call in. It's 567-70-DRINK. That's 567-703-7465. And you can call right into the show and do it that way. Or, like I said, you can take part in the chat, which you can see coming up on the screen right there, or wherever you are. Most people are hanging out on Facebook. Most people usually hang out on Facebook, so you can also obviously see it in your Facebook chat there. But like I said, I've got a conversation that I'm ready to have tonight. Marco is getting ready to leave work and to go get truth. Matt is drinking water 24 hours into a fast. He says, I'm jealous and starving and not sure how long I'll last. I can tell you how long I would last, and it's not that long. Let's see. Julia just opened up our Shays Twitchy Imperial Stout, aged on pumpkin pie spice, coffee, and habaneros. That actually sounds really good, depending on how spicy it is, of course. I'm not a huge fan of super spicy beers, but every once in a while, it just kind of hits the spot. And we are starting to get towards that time of year where it might hit the spot a little bit better than others. The conversation I want to have tonight, I do have some labels to roll through. It's been a few weeks. Not only has it been a few weeks since I've had a regular weekly pint episode, there's been even longer since I had some labels. That doesn't mean we have a ton. I have 8 of them to roll through. Not all beer, a couple other things that I thought were interesting, but I do want to crack open a beer, so I'm going to mention this idea that I'm playing around with. I don't want to say who made these beers. I have 2 different ones, and I've put some tape on them to tell me the difference. 2 cans, identical except for what's written underneath the tape. What this is the same beer. One of these is contract brewed, and one of these is brewed in-house in the brewery, which is why I don't really want to say whose beer this is, because not everybody talks about contract brewing, which is the conversation that I want to have. I have been toying around with this idea for a show for a while, and have gone back and forth if I'm going to do an episode of Cincy Brewcast where we really dive into contract brewing, or if I was going to just do it as a video or something like that. And I figured with these 2 beers sitting here, it makes for an interesting conversation with you guys. Because number one, I mean, we'll dive into some of the questions that I have. Does anybody actually care about contract brewing? Number 2, does it make a difference? Let's see. John is drinking A Missing Link by Westside. I believe I'm out of Missing Link. That was a good beer. Number 2, can you actually tell a difference? Is there a difference between these 2 beers? And number 3, I really want to kind of try to dive into the ramifications of contract brewing and the difference. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We will get there. I need to crack both of these open. We're just going to call them A and B, or we won't even do that. We'll call them what glass they're in. We have Louisville Ale Trail, and then I've got Sugar Creek Brewing Company glass. Both the same style glass, so that shouldn't affect my opinions too much. All right. Louisville Ale Trail right there. And then, so in theory, if you are a brewery that is making a beer and you decide you also want to contract brew that beer to get it out into packaging, you want it to taste the same as it does no matter where you are. If your customer is sitting in your tap room and having that beer, you want them to have the same experience as they would at home having it out of a can. I can tell you right now, I don't know how noticeable that is. These, here, let me get I guess I can unplug that, yeah. Get a light on these for you. That's the wrong button. Hang on, guys. All right, so here is the Louisville Ale Trail. And then here is the Sugar Creek. I don't know if you can tell, but one is distinctly more clear than the other one. Not clear, I mean, yes, brilliant clear. You can see right through it. The other one has a haze to it. The color, though, is about the same. But there is definitely a difference between these two beers just looking at them. That doesn't mean it's going to taste bad, but they look different. All right, let's see. John says, I do because it just feels dishonest. Matt says, I don't care either way. I'd love to try a taste test like this, though. Curious if there's a difference. Julia says, if they're honest with what's going on, i.e. what's being made, I won't care. I can't read the little screen. I have two screens with your chat on it, and I, for some reason, can't read this one the way it's set up. If they're honest with what's going on, i.e. where it's being made, I won't care as far as it's swaying me from buying it, but if there's a taste difference between the two, it could certainly make me care. Sean says, what if the contract brewed beer tastes better? And John says, I would care if the quality of the beer was less. Yeah, I mean, if it opens up a whole other set of questions. If the contract beer is better, why are you making beer? You want it to be the same. You want it to be identical. It's if my brain is the same as the people that are doing it. But as these are sitting here, there is a difference with the head too. I don't know how much that shows up on the way this camera is set up, but the one in the Sugar Creek glass here, this one it has a kind of a thicker, creamier head. It leaves a little bit more lacing as you kind of move the glass around. That's the clear one, the one that's not as hazy. There's not a huge difference in aroma. Enough, though, that if you told me these were two different beers, I would believe you. I mean, they're clearly two different beers. Bear with me while I drink. There is a distinct difference between the two. So, Julia says the Sugar Creek beer looks like it has a much wider head. I wouldn't say it's wider. It's definitely a little bit lighter in color, but definitely not white. Neither of these have a white head on them, but there is a definite difference. Neither of them are bad. Like, there is not like a a flaw. Well, with Oktoberfest, in my opinion, having a hazy Oktoberfest is a flaw, but I don't know that that's actually a thing. Actually, I could look. The BJCP guidelines, I'm pretty sure. If anybody on here knows off the top of your head, feel free to chime in before I spend all this time looking. I'm going to call these Märtzens, even though, as we've discussed lots of times, everything just kind of turns out to be a bit of a blend. Märzen. Appearance, bright clarity, persistent off-white foam stand. So bright clarity is a definite piece of the style, and as you can see, one of these is and one of these is not. This is the problem. This is one of the problems, especially if you're somebody like me, you're doing this Oktoberfest quest, you're trying to drink all of these packaged Oktoberfest. The first 6-pack that I bought of this beer, I'm going to guess was this one. And the second one that I now have, I'm going to guess is this one. I don't know for a fact that this is the contract brewed one and that this is... I don't know for a fact this is contract brewed and that this is made in the tap room, but that is my assumption just looking at them and tasting them. John says, I think that's an issue because there's nothing worse than grabbing beer you like, but it tasting different. Exactly. Or, again, what I was getting ready to say, when you're doing this big Oktoberfest quest like this, and this is an amplified version of what can happen with a normal person, I may try this one, and next to somebody else's Oktoberfest that I picked up a 6-pack from the tap room, or that they don't contract brew, I would say that Oktoberfest is better than this Oktoberfest, even if it just came down to the appearance. And that is not fair to what this beer, assuming that I'm right about which one's which, is supposed to be. It's not fair to the beer. It's not fair to the brewer that makes this beer, the person whose recipe this is. I can see even a difference now just in the head, how thin this one has kind of turned out to be. Let me make it clear here. Neither of these beers taste bad. They're both fine beers. If they were going against each other, this one would be a clear winner for me, though. It's a little bit drier. And here's a good question from Julia. A possible dumb question. Is pretty much all contract beer packaged, or could you go to a tap room and what they have on tap wasn't made there? Yes. So diving into the bigger conversation, I'll pull the labels off of these in just a second, and see which one's which. But I'm pretty confident in my assumption here. Let me pull up my notes for this episode. If I can find what I'm looking for. What's the name of the show? Weekly Pint. Sorry, my notes are not that I'm not organized in them, but without a keyboard right now, it is oh Lord. I keep mistapping. There we go. Okay. Let's see. Sean says, ask Brewdog. Not the same, but still. And Julia says, damn, shots fired. It is different. So let's start with a bigger picture. In Cincinnati right now, in theory, now some of these places don't talk about contract brewing. There are 9 breweries who I know are either currently or frequently do some form of contract brewing. Matt says, I've heard of a local brewery that contracts due to their traffic being so heavy that their system can't provide enough, so I imagine their taps are contracted. And then there are two places that I have heard from people do some contracting, but I can't find any evidence of that, no matter how deep I start digging into it. Within those 9 that I know contract brew. Now, some of those are real simple. The Motors Brewing Company doesn't have a tap room, doesn't have a brew house. You guys know that they're contracting somewhere. That has shifted a little bit from throughout their history, but that's an easy one. There's places like Alexandria, who has been very open about their contracting of just their cans at Wood and Cask. There are places like Moorline that has said, yes, we're contracting locally. That is all of our cans and our draft from the new Moorline line, but then all of the stuff at the lager house is brewed on site. There are places like Urban Artifact that's been really open about their contracting from time to time just to meet demand and to keep up with production. But that is stuff that is in packaging. Then there are places that I know are contracting that don't package at all. They are draft only. So you can walk into the tap room and they have a beer. They have beers. They have a beer that is flavored differently to create different beers that is brewed by somebody else. I, as a bit of an experiment, this has been a couple months, but sat down at the bar and I saw that beer and I saw the several different versions of it, and I asked them. I said, "Hey, do you guys make all this beer here in house?" This is, the fun anonymous side of blogging, because the bartender doesn't know who I am. And the answer was, "Yeah, of course. We're a craft brewery. We make all this beer right around the corner there. That's where our brew house is. We have a brewmaster, as it was worded, that makes every one of these beers." That's not true, and I know that's not true. At that time, there were several of those taps that were not brewed there. Now, sometimes when you go into a tap room, you'll see a cider on tap, and it'll say, "Oh, this is Cider Boys," or you'll see a seltzer available. And, "Oh, we have Vive and our beers," or whatever it is. We'll say Astra, because Astra is what all the cool kids drink. But when it comes to these contract beers, that's not the case at all. There are places that you can sit down and think you're drinking a beer that was brewed right there, and it wasn't. Now, I'm not gonna say that's a horrible thing. The place that I'm referring to does at least contract that beer locally by a brewery that I think makes great beer. The beer in question is a great beer, but it's a very strange feeling. Know that somebody is being dishonest with you, and I don't know that the bartender I was talking to was purposely being dishonest. I think that they just didn't know either, which is a problem in my opinion. Let's see. Julia replying to Matt about the local brewery. Matt, you may be talking about the same one that I am. Julia says, "I'm fine with this as long as somehow, somewhere they advise us. Not that I necessarily care if the taste, quality, etc. is the same, but just keeping the trust level with the consumer, being honest, transparent with it, if that makes sense." It makes perfect sense to me. John says, "I suspect Braxton is doing this, but I could be wrong." Braxton is one of those two that are rumored. I have had lots of people tell me that they are contracting, and I can't find any evidence of that. I've never asked them directly, but the next time I talk to them, I definitely will be. Matt says, "Interesting. That's not who I was referring to." No, definitely not who I was referring to either. The one that I'm referring to, I know they have contracted. There's a couple of places like that I know are doing it, or I know are not really talking about it. There are some places that are not It's not super obvious that they are, but if you ask them, they will tell you. This is one of those examples. The people that make this beer, if you ask them, they will tell you. Especially since they know that this is happening. When if you're a beer drinker and you look at both of these beers, you know that this is not the same beer. Let's go ahead and pull these off and let's make sure I'm right. There is no way that I'm wrong about this. So this can is the hazy, in my opinion, lesser beer. Oh, what do you know? Contract brewed. And the beautiful example of the style is, there we go, in-house. It's a shame. It would infuriate me if I created a product and I trusted somebody else to carry that product onto the next step, or to help me in getting that product into people's hands, and they were clearly not making that same product. Marco says, if you're not telling people you are contract brewing, I would like to know why. And that is a great point. There is a I don't know, a stigma around contract brewing, and it's not always bad. If we look at the history of contract brewing in Cincinnati, in the 90s, which is kind of where most of my beer knowledge starts. I have some before that, but in the 90s, we had the Queen City Brewery, not the same Queen City Brewery of Cincinnati that a lot of you guys are familiar with. This was a restaurant group. It wasn't at the time. It was a brewery first that grew into a restaurant group. They eventually changed their name, and they, as the Queen City group, they started a chain of breweries. They had, Julia says, did I mishear you? Know this brewery you're testing knows that there's a difference? Not asking you to name names, just curious if they're working to remedy the situation. Yes. Yeah, they definitely know there's a difference. And yes, they, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus with this, but yeah, they're definitely working to remedy the situation. But this is definitely a case of growing pains, I think, of I don't know how to put it without throwing them out there of who they are. They know it's a problem. A problem isn't even, they know that these beers do not taste the same. At least some of the people that I've talked to within the brewery would like this to be different, but it requires, like Matt pointed out, money to grow to the point where you can make the same amount of beer in-house. Chris says, brewing equipment is crazy expensive, and few guys have enough tank space to help others scale their businesses. If they're dialing your recipes the way they should, and when moving to different water, there's bound to be a change. It can only be good for us as consumers. It is. What do you mean it can only be good for us as consumers? This is not good for the consumer. Putting out two different products is not. There's no way that this is good for a consumer. Yes, it's easier to get the beer, but I don't know that I want to get this beer and think that this is what this is supposed to be. That's bad for the consumer. Just glad they care enough to try to fix it, they definitely care enough to fix it. I don't know when it will be remedied, but there are. I mean, if we really want to go down some rumor rabbit holes, non-rumors, there are places that are or were contracting with one place that were not happy with what was happening to their beer, that have changed the place that they're contracting with. There are a small group of places that are available to contract here in town. Chris says, I think that's a growing pain though. I think. John says that can be bad. I could try a local beer's can first and never go into their tap room. Chris said, hell no, we're not as far as contracting Astra. See that posh new canning line. Let me make this clear too. This would not stop me from going into the tap room to try the beer. I think this is like I said, it's a fine beer. It's okay. I would drink it. There is no way that this could win my Oktoberfest quest, though. This doesn't stand up next to other Oktoberfest beers. This one does stand up next to other Oktoberfest beers, and it's a problem, guys. If anybody thinks that this is not a problem, it is a problem. But so what I was saying before is that there are places that are contracting that were not happy with the result they were getting from one place that switched to a different place. There are places that are extremely active to try to stop contract brewing with places because they're not happy with the result. My big point in all of this is I hate the dishonesty that is around it sometimes. I want to know when I especially when I walk into a tap room, if these are. If you missed the beginning of the show, Chris, this is the same beer, contract brewed, not contract brewed, and I opened them up blind. I put labels on on my little cheat sheet of which one's which. I want to know when I walk into a tap room who made my beer. I don't necessarily care if it was made there. If you tell me, oh yeah, these taps we brewed here. These ones are our recipes, but we brewed them here because we don't have the capacity right now to keep up with how much beer you guys are drinking. I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that at all. I mean, I keep getting sidetracked. Going back to that history side of it, Queen City Restaurant Group had places like Holy Grail, Teller's, Bella. These were restaurants that were serving Queen City beer, but weren't actually brewing it. It was contracted, sort of. It was tap rooms. You had places like Main Street and Watson Brothers were all under that same umbrella. They did not contract at all of those places, but some of them were taking, at the end there, Watson Brothers was brewing the beer for places like Holy Grail, I believe. That timeline might not add up. Watson Brothers was brewing for other places. And I'm okay with that as long as you know that this beer is not actually made in the basement here at Teller's. You had Sam Adams coming into town in the 90s, contracting at Hudipole Shaneling. Hudipole Shaneling was one of the breweries around the country that was cranking out Boston Lager and things like that. That was where Sam Adams came from. I don't have a problem with that as long as you know that it's not made in a tap room that you're sitting at. It becomes weird when you're actively being misled, It's a big conversation that I would really, really, really love to get the chance to sit down and talk to somebody that is willing to talk about it. Probably the only person that I think I could get to sit down on a brewcast or any show to really kind of talk about contract brewing that has contract brewed that has an opinion on it. I think Brett would probably talk about it, Brett from Urban. Matt says, do you think us craft beer nerds are the only ones that care this much, though? If so, I think we're in the minority of consumers purchasers, or do you think a majority of consumers do care or want to know? That is a very, very good question, and the simple answer is no, most people don't care. But the integrity of craft beer is something that most people, when they walk into their local tap room, don't give two shits about, but is a huge part of why they're there, whether they know it or not. in order to maintain this thing that people like us and people like these people making our beer have spent decades building, you have to be honest about your product. That was something that for a very long time the big beer companies weren't being. They weren't open. They weren't honest. You couldn't see the places your beer was making. You didn't really know what was in it or what wasn't in it. Whereas craft beer came in and you could sit down in a tap room that was owned and operated by your neighbors in a lot of cases. And if you had a question, you asked and they answered. And they told you. If you said, what's in this beer? It was, hey, come on, I'll show you. And you could see the process. You could see the ingredients. You knew what was happening. This new world of craft beer is shifting and it's changing, and I don't know that it's for the better. I don't know it's horrible, but Julia says, update on the Twitchy. That's the beer she's drinking. It has a bit of a lip tingle, but no real heat. Even as it warms up, it smells like it would be hot, but it's not, which is kind of disappointing to me. See, I think that sounds like it would be delicious. That sounds right up my alley. Let's look at some beer labels. We can still keep talking about the contract brewed thing, but the bigger point is that it definitely is something that we as beer drinkers, I think, need to be talking about. And when you're going into a tap room, I don't want you to have to sit there and look up and be like, man, I wonder if all these beers were made here. Like, that's crazy that you would have to think that. Matt says, upfront and honesty or honest if asked. Do you think some breweries are denying that they're contracting? In my experience, they've just told me. No, 100%. There are places that I know are contracting that I have asked, and they said no. Again, whether or not the bartender actually knew, I don't know. But that's a problem to me. If the bartender thinks, the person that is pouring the beers thinks that they made that beer and they didn't, that's a problem. Marco says, I'm open to hearing why a brewery is not being forthcoming about contract brewing, but they will need to be very convincing to change my mind that they should be honest. Yes, I agree with that. And I get sometimes, I understand maybe not wanting to talk about who is making that beer, but even that, I like the approach of saying, oh yeah, the Alexandria is the great example. If you ask them who makes this can of beer that you got at the store, they'll tell you, oh yeah, Wooden Cask made that. They're proud of that. To me, Wooden Cask should be proud of that. It should be a relationship between those two breweries, not a contract, and that shouldn't be marketed as a contract. It's an arrangement, it's an agreement, it's a relationship, and that is a big part of what craft beer is about. That's my opinion. Julie says, oh, it's delicious for sure, but don't say habanero if there's no heat in your beer. Sean says, I've had it the past 2 years, and I think last year's was too hot for the gin pop, and they chilled on the heat this year. All right, let's look at some labels. This one has a good story with it, which I hope I'm allowed to tell. If not, I will ask for forgiveness. Let me pull the chat off the screen for you guys. All right. We have, let me pull myself up there. Kenny's Day Drinking Lager. You guys know about this beer. The beer itself is not a surprise, but we've got the label coming through now. I did hear, and I don't think Dell is on here, but if he is and he didn't want this story public, I apologize. I heard there was a little bit of a conversation between 16 Lots and the NFL over this label, and no lawsuits are happening, but there was definitely some grumpy guys in suits that that had some words about the fact that this beer exists, which I think is fun. I'm like, anybody stirring up a little bit of trouble on something that there's no one thing on this label that is copyrighted that I can see. I think it's I think it's in the clear, but, you know, the NFL. Yes, Marco, you were there. I was at the Zane Lamprey show. I have not had this beer yet, but I'm definitely looking forward to trying it. I love a good, easy drinking lager, 4.2%. And anything that gives back to charity, I am all about. Next up, some Astra labels coming through. Pink lemonade. You guys are familiar with Astra. I actually have not had the pink lemonade, and I'm ashamed to admit that with how much I am a fan of what they are doing over there. A new Mad Tree one coming through. We haven't seen Mad Tree with anything. Sean says looks more Browns than Bengals. That is the original Bengals uniforms. Julia says love the new Astra handles they posted. Yes. I think the new tap handles are amazing. It's been a little while since we saw some new Mad Tree labels coming through. They put out a poll on social media a little while back about different versions of psychopathy that people might want to see, and I'm guessing that this was the winner. Tropical psychopathy. Passion fruit, orange, guava. It says you can hear the sound of the ocean after drinking each can. Tropical IPA with natural flavors, 6.9%. A tropical trip in every sip. So I'm excited to get my hands on that one. Next up, a new one from Rheingeist. This is called Raspy Cat. An ale with natural flavors and colored with elderberry extract. It says one colorful cat. Fresh additions of raspberries and hibiscus give this wheat ale loads of berry flavor and just a hint of floral nuance. Bright, refreshing, and slightly tart. A Raspy Cat is ruby red riff on a favorite style. Sorry, something's giving me a bunch of notifications. It's driving me crazy. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I definitely can. It is it's my day job, of course. The app we use for our schedules makes noise every time a new appointment drops in, and my boss must have just thrown like 37 appointments onto my schedule for this week. Fruited wheat beer with raspberry hibiscus. You guys know the drill on something like this. 5%. It's going to be delicious, easy drinking. Yeah, Rheingeist definitely knows what they're doing. I love the artwork on this one. Taft's New Zealand Wipeout, a New Zealand style IPA. I'm a big fan of a lot of those New Zealand hops. I don't know if this says specifically what we've got. No, it doesn't. Just New Zealand style IPA. 7.2%. It sits right in line with a lot of those IPAs they do as far as the ABV, just different hops. Nothing wrong with that. Another love letter variant. This one is Peach Melba with a dung beetle. And then shout out to Valley Vineyards. I have a couple Valley Vineyards labels. This is their mead. Getting a little bit of a refresh. If you guys didn't know that Valley Vineyards made mead, there's a lot of talk about places that are making mead, and nobody mentions that these guys have been cranking out some great mead for a really long time. Sean says they missed the boat by not having them ride the wave in the bathtub. Going back to yeah, that's a good point. Instead of having this guy on the surfboard, have the tub with Taft riding in it. Julia says Valley Vineyards, never heard of them. They knew. Marco says a lot of new labels and new wines. Speaking of new wines or wine labels, Hillside Red. I admittedly don't drink a ton of wine, but Jeff says they're a steak place, I think. Every time I go there and have a steak, whoever cooks it for me is terrible. It's me. I like I was saying, I admittedly don't drink a ton of wine, but also admittedly kind of wish that I did drink more wine, because it's not that I don't like wine. It's just, there's so many other things. So I'm trying to find the chat for you. Sorry. I'm all out of sorts. All fired up about these Oktoberfests, which is just the tip of the iceberg. For if this is happening with this, it's happening with everything. Marco says, let's get together and drink wine. We will. We definitely will sometime. I'm getting ready to, according to my tentative schedule that I put out. So this next brewcast, I am up at Sonder for their Oktoberfest this coming weekend. The show after that, I was planning to do the final round of the Oktoberfest quest, but I'm still waiting on one to be released. So I was also hoping to wait on moving into round 2 until I had the entire first round finished. That's not going to happen. I need to kick into round 2 this week, I think, to keep things moving, waiting for that last one. But we're on track. It'll definitely be October before the finals. I need to figure out a better logistical system to do this thing every year. You'd think that it would be easy, but it is not. So we'll kind of wrap things up, guys. I definitely wanted to talk about the contract brewing thing, and I'm probably not done talking about it. It's gotten under my skin, and this is the first time that it's really been confirmed for me that there's some very different beers being put out, and that it's not close even. I mean, it's just different beers. I wish, like I said, that one of the folks that is contracting that maybe has some opinions on it would be willing to sit down and talk about it sometime. I know it's hard to do that and not piss anybody off or break any of those contracts maybe on some of those occasions, but I would love to. So if anybody's listening and they are that person and want to do that, feel free to reach out on wherever. But as far as upcoming shows, if any of you want to ever be on a show, have any ideas of fun things to do, feel free to reach out and we can work that in, especially as we go through the winter. The excitement, or I shouldn't say the excitement, some of the eagerness of craft breweries to sit down and talk about stuff kind of drifts off a little bit. Typically, they don't have as much to talk about, so we get to do some more of those fun episodes. I'm always looking for people to sit down and talk beer. So feel free to reach out about that too. If you like what I do, including this show that is not a show, or the Brewcast or any of that, you can always support it by going to thegnarlygnome.com/support, and it helps a ton. I'm working on some really fun stuff, some fun projects, some collaborative projects that I don't think I can talk about yet. We have some final meetings for one of the things coming up. I shouldn't say final meetings. Some of the final big meetings coming up this week. And I'll be able to start talking about that, I think next week. You'll start to see some stuff popping up about it, including a new video that I've been working on. Tomorrow morning, I have another video that I've been working on. Unrelated, but it's a fun one. I'm talking about vacation, which gives you an idea of how long it took me to get done. Julia said, I sent you an idea for a show at the zoo a while back, but I think logistics of that are near impossible to get everyone together. Maybe do it as a ninja show without the zoo's participation. No, I don't think it's impossible. But I'm thinking we need to wait till COVID is a little less crazy. But it's definitely on my list. It's there. There have been some ideas that are on my list that are definitely still in some kind of progress. But I appreciate all you guys do. Thanks for hanging out with us and having a drink and listening to me rant and rave about contract beer, which again, I don't know how much most people actually care about stuff like that, but I think we probably should be caring more than maybe we are. So feel free the next time you're at your local tap room and you sit down at the bar, ask them if they made all their beer, and if they give you a funny look, know that they're not everybody's being honest. Most of the places, I will say this, most of the places that are contracting their cans are not also contracting in the tap room. I only know most, and most places locally will tell you that they contract if they do, and you ask them. So, not everybody's lying, but there are still some people being dishonest. There are people that would prefer you not ask. Let's put it that way. Thank you guys. We'll be back next week. Like I said, new video in the morning and all kinds of fun stuff coming. New episode of Prost this week. My first pumpkin beer. I'll give you that little sneak peek. As much as I didn't want to drink a pumpkin beer this early, I did. Julia says, I don't fault the bartenders for not being told. I just think they should know if they get to. Yes, I agree with that. I don't fault anybody that doesn't know, but sign of a bigger problem, guys. Cheers, everybody.